State. There we go. And I would like to welcome you all to 2013's Banned Book Week virtual readout. I myself, Shay, you guys can call me Shay, and Rosemary will be your moderators for this readout. And like I said, I just want to welcome everyone here. All right. We're going to start with the presentation. Now, like I said, we're San Jose State University's ALASC, and our mission statement is the American Library Association Student Chapter at San Jose State University fosters community and connection among all students and across all career paths within the School of Library and Information Sciences. Our vision statement, give me one moment. Our vision statement is ALASC is committed to providing an all-encompassing, welcoming, and supportive environment for SLIS students to connect, collaborate, and grow. To prepare our members and inspire our students for services as librarians, archivists, educators, membership is open to all SLIS students free of charge and provides resources for professional development, scholarly opportunities, and networking. Through LASC, students can share their creativity, skills, and experiences, learn from each other's lives and experts through the country and around the world, and connect with ALA both online and in person. We believe that we can make a difference in the lives of our student members by implementing programs and services that enrich their scholastic and professional experiences with opportunities that give them access to a new era of scholarship, innovation, and contribution on both local and global levels. And thusly, our value statement is the American Library Association Student Chapter at San Jose State University was founded on May 17, 1994, with the history of service and encouraging achievement on behalf of our student members. As the 42nd official student chapter of the ALA, San Jose State University's ALASC chapter has always supported our members' efforts to excel in both their studies and in their professional lives. Now, Banned Book Week. It was founded in 1982 in response to the sudden surge of banned and challenged books in school and public libraries. This event has lasted well over 30 years. Last year, we celebrated 30 years, and it is in support of the First Amendment and came out as a response to the sudden surge. It's usually set in the last week of September, which is why we're here celebrating it today with our virtual readout. And the Banned Book Week is sponsored by the American Library Association, the American Booksellers Association, American Booksellers Foundation for Free Expression, as well as several other organizations. The freedom of speech and the freedom of press are two principles that advocate thought and information. And as members of the field of information in library studies, it's our organization and our job to protect said freedom. We advocate that freedom with Banned Book Week. Okay. Now, Banned Book Week or challenged books are a group of books that are challenged with the intention of removing or restricting materials based on the objections of a person or group. And ordinarily, a person or group will contest the book at a particular institution due to it portraying an unorthodox or unpopular idea or set of beliefs. Successfully banning a book would remove the material from the library's content and curriculum, thereby cutting off access. And the word censorship is often used when discussing banned or challenged books because it's literally the suppression of speech or other public communication, which may be considered objectionable, harmful, sensitive, politically incorrect, or inconvenient. And why are these books banned? I chose this picture here. The worst part of censorship is, and it's blackened out, because really it's often articulated what it does, but we never really see the tail end of it. And I feel personally it's like a current, and it continues, and it flows down to the lowest levels, even if it's elementary students. Like books that are often banned, they often have content that are sexually explicit, violent, and contain offensive language. The idea of banning books is truly censorship, whether or not it's subtle or blatant, and it denies intellectual freedom. Often people are cited to be trying to protect our children or a group of people from particular ideas, which in essence denies them the right to that information, something that the LIS feels is bound to protect. And the Library Bill of Rights. 4 out of the 6 sections of the Bill of Rights can be readily attributed to the need to advocate and support the access to information, in this case books, regardless of the content. Members of the LIS community day in and day out are advocates of intellectual freedom, and facilitating access to these materials is necessary. Only a parent truly has the right and the ability to restrict access to their child. It's our responsibility in the LIS field and members of it to protect those rights and freedoms as they pertain to the library and those that are patronizing it. This here is a map of censorship that I found off of the Banned Books website. And the pinpoints are documented cases of challenged and banned books from 2007 to 2011. There have been 348 declared incidents of challenged and banned books. And the LAA firmly believes that it's only 20 to 25% of the cases that are actually being reported. Most incidents go unrecognized by the LAA, not because the LAA doesn't care, but because school and public libraries just fail to report them. There's still some pinpoints too over in California, but it was an overwhelming amount over on the South and in the Midwest and on the East Coast. Okay. And the challenges, expressions of concern. The expression of concern is just an inquiry that has judgmental overtones, and is often when a parent or a teacher or whomever comes and they just simply express their concern. And then from there is the oral complaint, and that's when an oral challenge is presented in regards to the appropriateness or lack thereof of the material in question. Then the third step actually would be the written complaint, and that's a formal written complaint filed with the institution, the library, the school, challenging the presence or the appropriateness for the specific material. Then there's public attack, a publicly disseminated statement, challenging the value of the material presented to the media, and then there's censorship, and that's a change in the access status of the material based on the content of the work. That could include exclusion, restriction, removal from particular age, grade levels, etc. On this side up here are some of the books that have been banned. Entangle makes 3, marked for removal because it discussed a gay couple raising a child. A child called It. It was challenged because it depicts graphic depictions of child abuse. 50 Shades of Grey. It was pulled from a bookshelf, but it was later returned because of discussion of S&M, but they coined it as a racy romance. Fight Club, it was removed due to the book's violent nature and explicit overtones. The Electric Kool-Aid Test, it was challenged because of the objectionable sexual content. The Glass Castle, that was removed, but later returned for child molestation, adolescent sexual exploits, and violence. And Beloved itself was challenged due to the depiction of bestiality, gang rape, and infanticide. Why does this matter? It's very simple. Free access and intellectual freedom. These are the grounds to the Library Bill of Rights. And as members of the LIS community, we're here to protect those rights. So Banned Book Week is a promotion or a celebration in the freedom that we have access to information and that we have the ability to read whatever it is that we'd like to. Okay. And finally, that leads us to our virtual readout. A lot of you have participated years prior, and if you haven't, this is your first one, then welcome. But how it works is you read one of your favorite passages from the banned book that you've chosen. You discuss why the book was banned or challenged and what that means to you and how you would feel if someone had prevented you from reading this book or the book that you chose in particular. So that was our quick presentation. I gave you guys just a general overlook of Banned Book Week. And thank you, Caroline. And we're going to move now on to the reading selection. So how we did it is that we had people come into a particular time slot. Everyone has 10 minutes to basically read the passage, to offer your insight, and then we can have room for discussion. And whoever has a comment, this is a safe space, it's a free space. You have the opportunity and freedom to say whatever you'd like as long as we're being respectful. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. So we're going to go ahead and just take a brief break. I'm going to get everything in order, and then we'll get everything started. Who's and ahs, that's my infant. He may want to participate in some capacity. Okay, can everyone hear me fine? Yes? Yes, perfect. Okay, and the book that I chose is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner. It won in 1983. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. Dear God, he beat me today because he said I winked at a boy in church. I may have got something in my eye, but I didn't wink. I don't even look at men. That's the truth. I look at women, though, because I'm not scared of them. Maybe because my mama cussed me. You think I kept mad at her, but I ain't. I felt sorry for mama, trying to believe his story killed her. Sometimes he still be looking at Nettie, but I always get in his light. Now I tell her to marry Mister. I don't tell her why. I say marry him, Nettie, and try to have one good year out your life. After that, I know she be big. But me, never again. A girl at church say you get big if you bleed every month. I don't bleed no more. Dear God, Mister finally come right out and ask for Nettie hand in marriage, but he won't let her go. He says she's too young, no experience. Say Mister got too many children already. Plus, what about that scandal? His wife calls her somebody killer. And what about all this stuff he hear about Suge Avery? What about that? I asked our new mammy about Suge Avery. What is it, I asked. She don't know, but she said she gonna find out. She do more than that. She get a picture, the first one of a real person I ever seen. She said Mister was taking something out his billfold to show Pa, and it fell out and slid under the table. Suge Avery was a woman, the most beautiful woman I ever saw. She more pretty than my mama. She about 10 times more prettier than me. I see her there in her fur, her face rouged, her hair looking like something tail. She grinning with her foot up on somebody's motor car. Her eyes serious though, sad though. I asked her to give me the picture, and all night long I stare at it. And now when I dream of Suge Avery. She be dressed to kill, whirling and laughing. Dear God, I asked him to take me instead of Nettie while our new man is sick. But he just asked me what I'm talking about. I tell him I can fix myself up for him. I duck into my room and come out wearing horsehair, feathers, and a pair of our new mammy high heel shoes. He beat me for dressing trampy, but he do it to me anyway. Mister come out that evening. In the bed crying. Nettie, she finally see the light of day, clear. Our new mammy, she see it too. She in her room crying. Nettie pinned the first one, then the other. She's so scared she go outdoors and vomit, but not out front where the two men is. Mister say, well, sir, I sure hope you don't change your mind. He say, nah, can't say I is. Mister say, well, you know my poor little one sure could use a mother. Well, he stayed real slow. I can't let you have Nettie. She's too young. Don't know nothing about what you tell her. Besides, I want her to get some more schooling. Make a school teacher out of her. But I can let you have Celie. She the oldest anyway. She ought to marry first. She ain't fresh though. But I expect, she's spoiled twice. But you don't need a fresh woman no how. I got a fresh one over there myself, and she's sick all the time. He spit over the railing. The children get on her nerves. She not much of a cook, and she big already. Mister, he don't say nothing. I stop crying, I'm so surprised. She ugly, you say. She ain't no stranger to hard work, and she clean, and God done fixed her. You can do everything you like to her. She ain't gonna make you feed it or clothe it. Mister still don't say nothing. I take out the picture of Sugar Avery. I look into her eyes. Her eyes say, yeah, it be that way sometimes. Fact is, he say, I gotta get rid of her. She too old to be living here at home. She a bad influence on my other girls. She come with her own linen. She can take that cow she raised down there back in the crib. But Nettie, you flat out can't have her. Not now, not ever. Mister finally speaks, clearing his throat. I ain't never really look at that one, he say. Well, next time you come, you can look at her. She ugly. She don't even look like she kin to Nettie. But she'll make a better wife. She ain't smart either. And I'll just be fair. You have to watch her, and she'll give away everything you own. But she work like a man. Mister said, how old is she? He says she near 20. And another thing, she tells lies. Dear God, it took him the whole spring, from March to June, to make up his mind to take me. All I thought about was Nettie. How she could come to me if I married him, and he'd be so love-struck with her, I could figure out a way for us to run away. Us both be hitting Nettie's school bus pretty hard, because us know we gotta be smart to get away. I know I'm not as pretty or as smart as Nettie, but she say I ain't dumb. The way you know who discovered America, Nettie says, it's about them cucumbers. That's what Columbus sounds like. I learned all about Columbus in first grade. But look like he the first thing I forgot. She say Columbus come here in boats called the Nita, the Peter, and the Santa Marita. Indians so nice to him, he forced a bunch of them back home with him to wait on his queen. But it's hard to think about getting married to Mister hanging over my head. The first time I got big, Pop took me out of school. He never cared that I loved it. Nettie stood there at the gate, holding tight on my hand. I was all dressed for the first day. You too dumb to keep schooling, Pa say. Nettie the clever one in the bunch. But Pa, Nettie said crying, Celie's smart too. Even Miss Beasley say so. Nettie dote on Miss Beasley. Ain't nobody like her in the world. Pa say, whoever listen to anything Addie Beasley has to say, she run off her mouth so much no man would have her. That's how come she had to teach school. She never look up from cleaning his guns. Pretty soon a bunch of white men come walking across the yard. They have guns too. I get up and follow them. The rest of the week I vomit and dress wild games. But Nettie never give up. Next thing I know, Miss Beasley at our house trying to talk to Pa. She say long as she been a teacher, she ain't never known nobody want to learn to bad but Nettie and me. But when Pa call out and she see how tight my dress is, she stops talking and go. Nettie still don't understand. I don't either. All of us notice that I'm sick and fat all the time. I feel bad sometimes Nettie done task me in learning, but look like nothing she could say can get in my brain and stay. She tried to tell me something about the ground being flat. I just say yeah, like I know it. I tell her how flat it looked to me. Mister come. Finally one day I looking all drug out. The woman he had helping him done quit. His mammy done said no more. He say, let me see her again. Pa call me. Celie, he say. Like it wasn't nothing. Mister want another look at you. I go stand in the door. The sun shine in my eyes. He's still up on his horse. He looked me up and down. Pa rattled his newspaper. Move up. He won't bite, he say. I got closer to the steps. But too close. But not too close, because I'm a little scared of his voice. Turn around, Pa say. I turn around. One of my little brothers come up. I think it was Lucius. He's fat and playful all the time, munching on something, he say. What you doing that for? Passe. Your sister thinking about getting married. Didn't mean nothing to him. He pulled up my dress tail and asked if he could have some blackberry jam out the safe. I say yeah. She good with children, Passe, rattling his paper open. Never heard her say a hard word. Never heard her say a hard word to marry one of them. Just give them everything they ask for. It's the only problem. So that's the selection that I read, or I chose to read. The Color Purple. It's been banned basically because of its discussion of homosexuality, the offensive language, and the sexually explicit nature of it. It discusses rape and incest and violence and racism. And when I first read this book, I was in high school, and it really didn't occur to me what exactly I was reading. It wasn't until I think I read it again later in college that I began to understand it. And just the story of a young woman living in the South who is mistreated because she's not beautiful, who's mistreated by her father, who's later given to her husband to be mistreated by him and to take care of his children. I thought that this book was profound in a lot of ways. And me not being able to read this book, I feel like it would have been a misgiving. I learned a lot about women's oppression through reading this book, especially women's oppression in the household, and as far as just what's considered to be family business, as far as rape and this young girl having 2 kids. And later in the story, I don't know how many of you have read it, but later in the story, her children are taken away from her, and she's stuck raising children for the man that she married. And we never learn what Mr's name is. That's all she refers to her husband as, is Mr. But her relationship with him is very stoic, and she doesn't have any real true feelings of love or any type of caring for him. It's a clear obligation between the two of them. And I feel like this book has affected a lot of people. It shed light onto an experience that many people just may not know about or wouldn't take the time to see had they not opened this book. So those are my thoughts on The Color Purple. I forgot all about the slide. Sorry. Now, I'm sorry. Lori, are you going to be reading? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Did anybody have any thoughts they wanted to share on The Color Purple? Yay? Nay?
Is it just one slide, or were we going to see different slides?
So what I did was I created a slide for every person who participated. So the next book that I have listed is for Jessica Young. I'm sorry, Jessica, this listed and tell me whether or not you chose a book. But I have a slide for you, and then I also have a slide for Lisa and then Amy. So as the presentation comes, we'll at least be able to see the cover of your book and the author. But Lori, if you were to read, then I wouldn't have one for you. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't know that I was reading. If you guys would like me to read, I will go ahead and do so.
That would be great. That would be great.
We still have, I guess, like another minute and a half or so for yours. So I guess we should see if someone wants to go ahead and ask questions about your book. And then at 3:40, I'll be ready.
Did anyone have any questions or want to share any thoughts? If you walked over at this book and if it impacted you in some way, then by all means, feel free to share.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me okay? Hopefully you can. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for reading an excerpt from that book. That book really impacted me in a huge way. It has every time that I've read it. The first time I read it, I was, I think, in middle school, and it really blew my mind in terms of learning about racism. As a young white girl, I was not impacted by racism, and so this book really helped me understand some things, and then also in terms of the homosexuality, that was really wonderful for me to read as a young person coming into a queer identity. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing, Caroline. Thank you. Anyone else? You can feel free to grab the mic. Okay. Lori, are you just about ready? We can go ahead and get started on your section now if you'd like.
Okay, I will go ahead. Again, I'm very sorry. I wasn't sure if I was going to be called upon to read today. We were trying to fill the slots, and so it looked like there was one last slot left open, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get it. So thank you very much for allowing me this chance. Okay, let's see. My book that I chose to read is The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier. And I guess before I read, just a couple of things about Mr. Cormier and the Chocolate War. Robert Cormier is listed as one of the ALA's most frequently banned authors of the 21st century. In 2001, 2002, and 4, 5, 9, and 7, sorry, that's a little out of order, but his books were banned, and the reasons given were offensive language, sexual content, and typically these were some of the reasons out of 458 challenges. And basically, just to quickly go over it, a challenge is defined as a formal written complaint filed with a library or a school requesting that materials be removed because of content or appropriateness. The number of challenges reflects only incidents reported. So the estimate is that for every reported challenge, 4 or 5 remain unreported. And so basically, Mr. Cormier's books often make the list. The Chocolate War was on this list basically, again, for being unsuitable to the age group, for violence, for offensive language, religious viewpoint, let's see, and nudity, which wasn't really in the book. So I guess, you know, the parents kind of went through it and saw, you know, an incident and thought that it was inappropriate. Okay, and let me go ahead and get started. The Chocolate War, Chapter 6. Brother Leon was getting ready to put on his show. Jerry knew the symptoms. All the guys knew them. Most of them were freshmen and had been in Leon's class only a month or so, but the teacher's pattern had already emerged. First, Leon gave them a reading assignment. Then he'd pace up and down, restless, sighing, wandering through the aisles, the blackboard pointer poised in his hand. The pointer he used either like a conductor's baton or a musketeer's sword. He'd use the tip to push around a book on the desk or to flick a kid's necktie, scratching gently down some guy's back, pointing the pointer as if he were a rubbish collector picking his way through the debris of the classroom. One day, the pointer had rested on Jerry's head for a moment and then passed on. Unaccountably, Jerry had shivered as if he had just escaped some terrible fate. Now aware of Leon prowling ceaselessly around the classroom, Jerry kept his eyes on paper, although he didn't feel like reading. 2 more periods. He looked forward to football practice. After days of calisthenics, the coach had said that probably he'd let them use the ball this afternoon. Enough of this crap. That was Brother Leon, always trying to shock, using words like crap and bull, and slipping in a few damns and hells once in a while. Actually, he did shock. Maybe because the words were so startling as they issued from his pale, inoffensive-looking little man. Later on, you found out that he wasn't inoffensive, of course. Now, everyone looked up at Leon as that word crap echoed in the room. 10 minutes left, enough time for Leon to perform, to play one of his games. The class looked at him in a kind of horrible fascination. The brothers' glance went slowly around the room like a ray of a lighthouse sweeping a familiar coast, searching for hidden defects. Jerry felt a sense of dread and anticipation, both at the same time. "Bailey," Leon said. "Yes, Brother Leon?" Leon would pick Bailey, one of the weak kids. High honor student, but shy, introverted, always reading, his eyes red-rimmed behind the glasses. "Up here," said Leon, finger beckoning. Bailey went quietly to the front of the room. Jerry could see a vein throbbing in the boy's temple. "As you know, gentlemen," Brother Leon began, addressing the class directly and ignoring Bailey completely although the boy was standing next to him. "As you know, a certain discipline must be maintained in a school. A line must be drawn between teachers and students. We teachers would love to be one of the boys, of course, but that line of separation must remain. An invisible line, perhaps still there." His moist eyes gleamed. "After all, you can't see the wind, but it's there. You see its handiwork, bending the trees, stirring the leaves." As he spoke, he gestured, his arm becoming wind, the pointer in his hand following the direction of the wind, and suddenly, without warning, striking Bailey on the cheek. The boy leapt backward in pain and surprise. "Bailey, I'm sorry," Leon said, but his voice lacked apology. Had it been an accident or another of Leon's little cruelties? Now all eyes were on the stricken Bailey. Brother Leon studied him, looking at him as if he were a specimen under a microscope, as if the specimen contained the germ of some deadly disease. You had to hand it to Leon. He was a superb actor. He loved to read short stories aloud, taking all the parts, providing all the sound effects. Nobody yawned or fell asleep in Leon's class. You had to be alert every minute, just as everyone was alert now, looking at Bailey, wondering what Leon's next move would be. Under Leon's steady gaze, Bailey had stopped stroking his cheek, even though a pink welt had appeared like an evil stain spreading on his flesh. Somehow the tables were turned. Now it seemed as if Bailey had been wrong and had been at fault all along, that Bailey had committed an error, had stood in the wrong place at the wrong time, and had caused his own misfortune. Jerry squirmed in his chair. Leon gave him the creeps, the way he could change the atmosphere in a room without even speaking a word. So that is sort of an introduction to one of the main characters of the Chocolate War, Brother Leon, who is one of the teachers who basically terrorizes the students in his class. Basically, I guess the question I would ask everyone regarding this reading or this book, if you've ever read it, is that, when I read this book as a teenager, this one, among others, made me wonder about the real reasons behind challenges and bans. And the one thing I thought of was that many of these books have the theme of disobedience and defiance, which is why I picked this particular book, because that's what the Chocolate War is about. And so disobedience and defiance is a frightening thing to adults, especially when it comes to children and teens who are doing the challenging and the defying of authority. So I just wanted to know what you guys thought about that. And let me clear the mic.
I think you're right. I think that many of the books that have to do with some sort of theme of disobedience, I think it goes back to the old debate when anybody is scared and tries to ban something, whether it's sex ed in schools or banning a book. If they read about it, they'll think it's okay and do it. It doesn't really give people, especially teenagers, a lot of credit for being able to think for themselves. But I think you definitely are onto something there.
Okay, thank you. I do see that it's 3:50, so we can, I guess we're against the break, but if anyone else wants to comment, I do see that a couple of you said that you haven't read the book before. Definitely it's worth taking a look at when you have some free time. But anyone else?
Great. Thank you, Lori. Thank you very much for sharing. I haven't read that book either, but that's added now on my list of things to read. Relax. That's my 5 minutes though. Sorry. Next we have Jessica. Jessica, do you have your book selection ready?
Hi, yes I do. I chose another Harry Potter book. It is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling.
Go ahead, Jessica. We're ready.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so I will go ahead then. So as I said, I'm going to be reading from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and on the off chance that anyone listening has not read the book yet, I will be reading out some spoilers. So with that, I will just begin. Blimey, haven't you heard? Said Hagrid, his smile fading a little. He lowered his voice, even though there was nobody in sight. Snape told all the Slytherins this morning. Thought everyone knew by now. Professor Lupin's a werewolf, see? And he was loose on the grounds last night. He's packing now, of course. He's packing? Said Harry, alarmed. Why? Leaving, isn't he? Said Hagrid, looking surprised that Harry had to ask. Resigned first thing this morning. Says he can't risk it happening again. Harry scrambled to his feet. I'm going to see him, he said to Ron and Hermione. But if he's resigned, doesn't sound like there's anything we can do. I don't care. I still want to see him. I'll meet you back here. Lupin's office door was open. He had already packed most of his things. The Grindylows' empty tank stood next to his battered old suitcase, which was open and nearly full. Lupin was bending over something on his desk and looked up only when Harry knocked on the door. I saw you coming, said Lupin, smiling. He pointed to the parchment he had been poring over. It was the Marauder's map. I just saw Hagrid, said Harry, and he said you'd resigned. It's not true, is it? I'm afraid it is, said Lupin. He started opening his desk drawers and taking out the contents. Why, said Harry. The Ministry of Magic don't think you were helping Sirius, do they? Lupin crossed to the door and closed it behind Harry. No, Professor Dumbledore managed to convince Fudge that I was trying to save your lives. He sighed. That was the final straw for Severus. I think the loss of the Order of Merlin hit him hard. So he, accidentally let slip that I am a werewolf this morning at breakfast. You're not leaving just because of that, said Harry. Lupin smiled wryly. This time tomorrow, the owls will start arriving from parents. They will not want a werewolf teaching their children, Harry. And after last night, I see their point. I could have been any of you. That must never happen again. You're the best defense against the dark arts teacher we've ever had, said Harry. Don't go. Lupin shook his head and didn't speak. He carried on emptying his drawers. Then, while Harry was trying to think of a good argument to make him stay, Lupin said, From what the headmaster told me this morning, you saved a lot of lives last night, Harry. If I'm proud of anything I've done this year, it's how much you've learned. Tell me about your Patronus. How do you know about that? Said Harry, distracted. What else could have driven the Dementors back? Harry told Lupin what had happened. When he'd finished, Lupin was smiling again. Yes, your father was always a stag when he transformed, he said. You guessed right. That's why we called him Prongs. Lupin threw his last few books into his case, closed the desk drawers, and turned to look at Harry. Here, I brought this from the Shrieking Shack last night, he said, handing Harry back the invisibility cloak. And he hesitated, then held out the Marauder's map, too. I am no longer your teacher, so I don't feel guilty about giving you back this as well. It's no use to me, and I dare say you, Ron, and Hermione will find usage for it. Harry took the map and grinned. You told me Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs would have wanted to lure me out of school. You said they'd have thought it was funny. And so we would have, said Lupin, now reaching down to close his case. I have no hesitation in saying that James would have been highly disappointed if his son had never found any of the secret passages out of the castle. There is a knock on the door. Harry hastily stuffed the Marauder's map and the invisibility cloak into his pocket. It was Professor Dumbledore. He didn't look surprised to see Harry there. Your carriage is at the gates, Remus, he said. Thank you, Headmaster. Lupin picked up his old suitcase and the empty Grindylow tank. Well, goodbye, Harry, he said, smiling. It has been a real pleasure teaching you. I feel sure we'll meet again sometime. Headmaster, there is no need to see me to the gates. I can manage. Harry had the impression that Lupin wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Goodbye, then, Remus, said Dumbledore soberly. Lupin shifted the Grindylow tank slightly so that he and Dumbledore could shake hands. Then, with a final nod to Harry and a swift smile, Lupin left the office. So, looking at why this book has been challenged, I found that the entire Harry Potter series has actually been challenged for various reasons over the years, and a few of those reasons are that it contains violence, and the series allegedly has an occult or satanic theme, and it was said that it promoted witchcraft as well. And for myself, I enjoyed the Harry Potter series because it showed Harry's journey growing up and maturing from a child into an adult, and it also introduced a new fantasy world similar to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings or C.S. Lewis's Narnia series, which I have also read and enjoyed. And for me, Harry Potter came out when I was in high school, but I know that for younger people, they grew up reading the series, and so they grew up and were around the same age as Harry Potter as he was experiencing these things. And of course, the series and the movies have just become a huge phenomenon. So in part because of that, I would be disappointed if someone prevented me from reading this book or the series, because I think that Harry Potter is a great contribution to fantasy literature, and it would have just been kind of sad not to have been able to take part in this huge literary phenomenon. And it also would have deprived me of the experience of imagining the characters and the events that happened in the books as I read about them myself. And if the movies were the only incarnation of Harry Potter that I would have had access to, then I would have only had the movies to rely on to visually supply what the characters looked like and how things went. And of course the movies do differ from the books themselves, So I just like being able to compare the sort of original source material of the books and then looking at the movies as well and enjoying both of those mediums. And I chose The Prisoner of Azkaban in particular for my book because it introduced the character of Professor Lupin. And I really liked this character and how he was presented as a positive influence and a caring teacher who wanted his students to learn, and someone who had to deal with prejudice from other people such as Snape and Draco Malfoy, and how he was able to handle that with dignity. And I also liked how Rowling used his name Remus Lupin to hint at his secret. So with that, I welcome any other thoughts you have about this book or maybe about the series in general. Thank you.
I'd like to speak on this book. I'll go ahead and start. I am a very, very big fan of the Harry Potter series, and I remember reading my first book when I was in the 7th grade. So you're absolutely right when you say this is a literary phenomenon, and I can't name very many that I've been able to participate in as far as waiting in line for books and seeing films come out. It was amazing. I felt their rendition on film, and like I said, I don't know how it feels to not to be deprived of a Harry Potter book. I currently work at I currently work at a Christian school library, and they have this on their banned book list for religious reasons. And irregardless, I still feel Harry Potter is still just, yeah, they do. It's ridiculous. There's a list, at least 200 books that they will not allow in their library. It's crazy. But Harry Potter, I feel like any child could read that and take something away from it as far as like encouragement and being brave and sacrifice and friendship. There's so many other Christian values that it promotes. But, oh well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, one of the major reasons why Harry Potter is banned is for religious reasons. And I remember reading a lot of, and hearing a lot of reviews and people discussing it, and a lot of the objection is that many people, mostly, I guess, Christian, I'm not sure about Muslims, but they kind of look at it as a book that promotes Satanism, which is never mentioned in the book, but I guess people kind of equate, magic and witches with Satanism, the devil and Satanism and things like that. And that comes from our puritanical history, probably. But I guess in the 21st century, hello. So, and also, I mean, I'm not as big of a fan of the books or the movies as many people are. I enjoyed the first one quite a bit, and frankly, for me, the rest of them kind of went downhill after that. But be that as it may, I do like them very much, and I think that in this this rash judgment of the books being filled with Satanistic, messages, they're missing the big message, which is good over evil, and good conquering evil, and how difficult it is to choose good, especially when you're a child like Harry Potter. Harry's a kid, and he has this tremendous burden on him to kind of get rid of this horrible problem that's not only plaguing the wizarding world, but, the human world. And I think that, you know, a lot of the people, it wasn't surprising in a lot of ways, but it was kind of, maybe surprising isn't the word, disappointing. It wasn't surprising, but it was very disappointing to realize that a lot of the people who were making these comments and who were trying to get it banned and burning the books like it was 1933 Germany, they never read the book. They were going off of somebody who also didn't read the book, who was going off of someone else who read the book and didn't understand the book. So, you know, a lot of this hysteria was really like, you know, it wasn't from reading the book and knowing it, and it was from hearsay. And it was just surprising to me. You know, since, you know, I guess as a Christian or religious person, you're not supposed to bear false witness and all of that stuff. But it was just it's a very interesting, what I like about the Potter series, more than the books and the movies. I'm sorry, I know you guys love it. You know, I like it too. I like it very much. But I like the controversy because I think it outlines more than most books how ridiculous and hypocritical a lot of this stuff is. I mean, not to get on my soapbox, but I just wanted to mention that. Okay, next.
I just wanted to, actually Lori made a lot of the same points I was going to make, but I was lucky enough to scandalize my born-again stepsister when I told her that I was reading the Harry Potter books with my son, who is the same age as hers. And the problem here is that any kind of fantasy that involves magic seems to set off radars for the born-again Christian community at the very least. I can't speak for any other religions, but having a few family members that are born again, I can speak to that. And it's a real disappointment because these are people who actually used to read science fiction and fantasy and now have decided that this is bad. And it's upsetting because they've read these books. They know better. But they've been told that anything that has to do with magic goes back to paganism and occultism, and that's wrong, and you're going to hell if you read that. And that's really the heart of what advocacy seeks to protect against, is that you have the freedom to read and explore anything you want. So that's just my 2 cents. And I am actually a really big Harry Potter fan.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jessica. You definitely started some conversation. And I see that Lisa is going to continue it for us with her examination or her review of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Lisa, are you ready? Yay, nay, maybe? Yep.
Thanks, Shay. And hi, everybody. Happy Banned Books Week. It's my favorite week of the year. So, yes, I'm going to follow up Jessica with a reading from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which is the first book in the series. And then I'll do my little comments afterwards. So, just to set it up, this is Harry's first class with Professor Snape. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to because the potions lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the start of term banquet, Harry had gotten the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potions lesson, he knew he'd been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry, he hated him. Potions lessons took place in one of the dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle, and would have been quite creepy enough without the pickled animals floating in glass jars all around the walls. Snape, like Flitwick, started the class by taking the roll call, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter, our new celebrity." Draco Malfoy and his friends, Crabbe and Goyle, sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty and made you think of dark tunnels. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent without effort. "As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape suddenly, "what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Powdered root of what to an infusion of what?" Harry glanced at Ron, who looked as stumped as he was. Hermione's hand had shot into the air. "I don't know, sir," said Harry. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Tut, tut, fame clearly isn't everything." He ignored Hermione's hand. "Let's try again, Potter. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" Hermione stretched her hand as high into the air as it would go without her leaving her seat, but Harry didn't have the faintest idea what a bezoar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who was shaking with laughter. "I don't know, sir." "Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, eh, Potter?" Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had looked through his books at the Dursleys, but did Snape expect him to remember everything in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. "What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane?" At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching toward the dungeon ceiling. "I don't know, sir," said Harry quietly. "I think Hermione does, though. Why don't you try her?" A few people laughed. Harry caught Seamus's eye, and Seamus winked. Snape, however, was not pleased. "Sit down," he snapped at Hermione. "For your information, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful it is known as the draught of living death. A bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat, and it will save you from the most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plant which also goes by the name of aconite." "Well, why aren't you all copying that down?" There was a sudden rummaging for quills and parchment. Over the noise, Snape said, "And a point will be taken from Gryffindor House for your cheek, Potter." Things didn't improve for the Gryffindors as the potions lesson continued. Snape put them all into pairs and set them to mixing up a simple potion to cure boils. He swept around in his long black cloak, watching them weigh dried nettles and crushed snake fangs, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, who he seemed to like. He was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy had stewed his horned slugs when clouds of acid green smoke and a hissing came from the dungeon. Neville had somehow managed to melt Seamus's cauldron into a twisted blob, and their potion was seeping across the stone floor, burning holes in people's shoes. Within seconds, the whole class was standing on their stools, while Neville, who'd been drenched in the potion when the cauldron collapsed, moaned in pain as angry red boils sprang up all over his arms and legs. "Idiot boy," snarled Snape, clearing the spilled potion away with one wave of his hand. "I suppose you added the porcupine quills before taking the cauldron off the fire?" Neville whimpered as boils started to pop up all over his nose. "Take him to the hospital wing," Snape spat at Seamus. Then he rounded on Harry and Ron, who'd been working next to Neville. "You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills?" Thought he'd make you look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor. This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him behind their cauldron. Don't push it, he muttered. I've heard Snape can turn very nasty. As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind was racing and his spirits were low. He'd lost 2 points for Gryffindor in his very first week. Why did Snape hate him so much? And that's the end of that section. So the next thing, Jessica covered so well the banning, and everybody had a great conversation. The only thing I'd add is that it also was frowned upon and tried to be banned because Harry lies, breaks rules, and disobeys authority figures, which we talked about with the Chocolate War as well. There was a school in England, St. Mary's Island Church. It's in Chatham, Kent, and I guess the head teacher, Carol Rockwood, said the Bible's clear and consistent in its teaching that wizards, devils, and demons exist and are very real, powerful, and dangerous, and God's people are told to have nothing to do with them. She added that, I believe it is confusing to children when something wicked is being made to look fun. And then the only thing, I think Jessica may have mentioned this too, is that they just became too dark and scary for children, and people didn't think they could handle them. They were on the banned book list in the top 10 in 2001, 2, and 3. And it doesn't even specify like the specific title, it just says Harry Potter, because they're just all in trouble all the time. So 2001 and 2, it was number 1, the top banned books. And in 2003, it slipped to number 3. Okay, so the other piece, the books mean a lot to me. I used to teach junior high English, and I really and truly witnessed firsthand that students really came back to reading in such a huge way. They're so valuable. And personally, I love boarding school stories, so I'd be sad if I didn't get to read this. And I also wouldn't have gotten to meet Snape, because unlike Jessica, who likes the good teacher Lupin, I love Snape, and I would have never known Alan Rickman. I see your smiley face, Mira. And I love Alan Rickman, and I own every movie, so that's my big thing. Okay. As far as when I started reading them, I kind of jumped on the, I wouldn't say bandwagon, maybe the broomstick, the Harry Potter broomstick, when the 4th one was just about to be released. And I attended that midnight show, or, the book release, and never stopped from there. And I've been to all the movies, and I made my own Snape costume, and I played Snape with my students at a Halloween party, and it was in a Catholic school, just saying. So that was pretty good. And I think that's it. I'll go ahead and turn the mic over. Thanks, everybody.
That was absolutely great. I think we are all in agreement. The accent, it just took us back to the Harry Potter on the big screen. Like that was really, really great. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. Lori, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I second that, or third it. I think a few people kind of screamed before I did. Excellent reading. I'm also, Rickman, Snape fan, so that was really, very well done. I guess in terms of Harry Potter, yeah, I remember that when it first came out, and maybe that's part of the frustration, is that this book was pretty much single-handedly responsible for kids really getting into reading. It was a gateway book. So it kind of led kids into not only reading material that was more difficult and it had, than they were used to. This book had Latin words in it, and this book, it didn't really talk down to kids. It was a really fun book, and, it helped them really get into reading, but also it helped them get into reading serials. Not just, to be content with one book, but to really have the patience and the, mental stamina to kind of stretch out the reading over a series of books. So I think that's part of perhaps what the frustration with this series is. And just to kind of go back to when we were talking about The Prisoner of Azkaban, I don't understand it, what the problem adults had with the book, even the religious adults, because as we were talking about before, most kids, maybe not all, but most kids do dream of having magical powers, superpowers, and they have this sense of wonder. And I remember when this book came out and everybody was making such a big stink about how it's, a bad book and all of this other stuff, I was just like, but it's a fun book. And if kids are getting into reading, it's not an evil book. It's not the Satanic Verses, So, they were acting like Salman Rushdie wrote the thing. So, and they were calling Rowling a witch and the whole thing. So, I wonder what I really would like to hear what people think. What is the threat? I mean, it can't simply be that these kids were, learning magic. Does anyone have really an idea? I would love to hear what you guys think about that. That's it.
You know what? I forgot to raise my hand. I'm sorry, but I'm going to jump in. And Lori, the only thing I can say is, I was in the convent for several years as a nun, and knowing the sort of mindset of the Catholic Church, that's the only one I can speak for. Anything that may be against the church is to be feared. And what I think happened is people just went crazy when they heard it was about kids learning to use magic, and without reading the books, immediately made an assumption that this was black magic and satanic. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you look at, if that's the primary reason, if you look at the Chronicles of Narnia, there's magic all through the books. They have a Christian theme. And it just drives me nuts because I think Harry Potter has much of the same good versus evil as we talked about before. So.
I agree. I also think that a reason that Lord of the Rings and Narnia have never, or rarely if ever, had any issues with being banned is because they are so clearly Christian Catholic allegories. A lot of people dismiss the fact that technically Dumbledore and Harry are both Catholic allegories too because they rise from the dead. But Tolkien was a devout Catholic and C.S. Lewis was a devout Christian. They were good friends. They wrote tons of letters to one another on the subject. And I think because there is that aspect to it and it is so well known, that's also why they haven't had the issues with being challenged that Rowling has.
Oh, if I could just pop in, Caroline and I were just saying the same thing. I'm like, what's going on with the calling of Rowling a witch then? I mean, I could understand, saying, well, she just wrote a bad book. There were even people who, like me, they liked the series, but they didn't think the books were particularly literature with a capital L, the same way Lord of the Rings has become. But no one of that sort of mindset really went into Rowling as a witch and burner kind of mentality. No one really, I'm just wondering why it got to that point? Why did it reach such a fever pitch? Was it a fever pitch because it's an easy target? You know, she wasn't really fighting back or anything, and everyone was kind of fighting the battle for her, but do you think it was because she was a woman and that she didn't really talk about her beliefs? I think she quietly sort of said, well, you know, I believe in God, I don't understand, but she wasn't as vocal, and she wasn't a, you know, an Oxbridge professor, and, you know, she wasn't one of the guys. Do you guys think that had anything to do with it? I know we're kind of maybe moving over a little bit and we need to cut it short, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can interject on that point. I think J.K. Rowling, she was very certain. They were very, very particular in how they marketed her initially, how they marketed the Harry Potter books initially. It was initially entitled Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or that's how it was sold or marketed over in Europe and in England. And I guess publishers here didn't think that would appeal to children in the United States. So they decided to make, you know, it the Sorcerer's Stone, and it gave it that magical element. But J.K. Rowling, she chose her name for a reason. I feel she wanted her book to appeal to little boys and young kids. And I'm not certain what her real name is, but Jessica Rowling on the cover of a Harry Potter book, I don't think it would have marketed the same way. But J.K. Rowling, that sounds cool and secretive. So. Okay, but I digress. Amy, is Amy in? Yes, you are. We're saying hello to Amy. Amy, would you happen to be ready at this time?
I am ready. So I am doing my reading from Looking for Alaska by John Green. Okay, so as soon as he finished unpacking, Chip hit me roughly on the shoulder and said, "I hope you're stronger than you look," and walked out the door, leaving it open behind him. He peeked his head back in a few seconds later and saw me standing still. "Well, come on, Miles to go halter. We got shit to do." We made our way to the TV room, which, according to Chip, contains the only cable TV on campus. Over the summer, it served as a storage unit. Packed nearly to the ceiling with couches, fridges, and rolled-up carpets, the TV room undulated with kids trying to find and haul away their stuff. Chip said hello to a few people, but didn't introduce me. As he wandered through the couch-stocked maze, I stood near the room's entrance, trying my best not to block pairs of roommates as they maneuvered furniture through the narrow front door. It took 10 minutes for Chip to find his stuff, and an hour more for us to make 4 trips back and forth across the dorm circle between the TV room and room 43. By the end, I wanted to crawl into Chip's mini fridge and sleep for 1,000 years, but Chip seemed immune to both fatigue and heat stroke. I sat down on his couch. "I found it lying on a curb in my neighborhood a couple years ago," he said of the couch as he worked on setting up my PlayStation 2 on top of his footlocker. "I know the leather's got some cracks in it, but come on, that's a damn nice couch." The leather had more than a few cracks. It was about 30% baby blue faux leather and 70% foam. But it felt damn good to me anyway. "All right," he said, "we're about done." He walked over to his desk and pulled a roll of duct tape from a drawer. "We just need your trunk." I got up, pulled the trunk out from under the bed, and Chip situated it between the couch and the PlayStation 2 and started tearing off thin strips of duct tape. He applied them to the trunk so that they spelled out "coffee table." "There," he said. He sat down and put his feet up on the coffee table. "Done." I sat down next to him, and he looked over at me and suddenly said, "Listen, I'm not going to be your entree to Culver Creek social life." Okay, I said, but I could hear the words catch in my throat. I just carried this guy's couch beneath a white-hot sun, and now he didn't like me? "Basically, you've got 2 groups here," he explained, speaking with increasing urgency. You got the regular boarders, like me, and then you got the weekday warriors. They board here, but they're all rich kids who live in Birmingham, go home to their parents' air-conditioned mansions every weekend. Those are the cool kids. I don't like them, and they don't like me, and so if you came here thinking that you were hot shit at public school, so you'll be hot shit here, you best not be seen with me. You did go to public school, didn't you? I said. Absent-mindedly, I began picking at the cracks in the couch's leather, digging my fingers into the foamy whiteness. Right, you did, probably, because if you'd gone to private school, your frickin' shorts would fit. He laughed. I wore my shorts just below my hips, which I thought was cool. Finally, I said, yeah, I went to public school, but I wasn't hot shit there, Chip. I was regular shit. Hey, that's good, and don't call me Chip. Call me the Colonel. I stifled a laugh. The Colonel? Yeah, the Colonel. And we'll call you, Pudge. Huh? Pudge, the Colonel said, 'cause you're skinny. It's called irony, Pudge. Heard of it? Now let's go get some cigarettes and start this year off right. He walked out of the room, again just assuming I'd follow, and this time I did. Mercifully, the sun was descending toward the horizon. We walked 5 doors down to room 48. A dry erase board was taped to the door using duct tape. In blue marker, it read, Alaska has a single. The Colonel explained to me that 1, this was Alaska's room, and that 2, she had a single room because the girl who was supposed to be her roommate got kicked out at the end of last year, and that 3, Alaska had cigarettes, although the Colonel neglected to ask me whether 4, I smoked, which 5, I didn't. He knocked once, loudly. Through the door, a voice screamed, oh my God, come in, you short little man, because I have the best story. We walked in. I turned to close the door behind me, and the Colonel shook his head and said, after 7, you have to leave the door open if you're in a girl's room. But I barely heard him because the hottest girl in all of human history was standing before me in cut-off jeans and a peach tank top. And she was talking over the Colonel, talking loud and fast. So, first day of summer, I'm in grand old Vine Station with this boy named Justin, and we're at his house watching TV on the couch. And mind you, I'm already dating Jake. Actually, I'm still dating him, miraculously enough, but Justin is a friend of mine from when I was a kid, and so we're watching TV and literally chatting about the SATs or something, and Justin puts his arm around me, and I think, oh, that's nice. We've been friends for so long, and this is totally comfortable, and we're just chatting, and then I'm in the middle of a sentence about analogies or something, and like a hawk, he reaches down and he honks my boob. Honk! A much too firm 2 to 3 second honk. And the first thing I thought was, okay, how do I extricate this claw from my boob before it leaves permanent marks? And the second thing I thought was, God, I can't wait to tell Takumi and the Colonel. The Colonel laughed. I stared, stunned, partly by the force of the voice emanating from this petite, but God, curvy girl, and partly by the gigantic stacks of books that lined her walls. Her library filled her bookshelves and then overflowed into waist-high stacks of books everywhere, piled haphazardly against the walls. If just one of them moved, I thought the domino effect could engulf the 3 of us in an asphyxiating mass of literature. Who's the guy that's not laughing at my very funny story, she asked. Oh, right. Alaska, this is Pudge. Pudge memorizes people's last words. Pudge, this is Alaska. She got her boob honked over the summer. She walked over to me with her hand extended, then made a quick move downward at the last moment and pulled down my shorts. Those are the biggest shorts in a state of Alabama. I like them baggy, I said, embarrassed, and pulled them up. They've been cool back home in Florida. So far in our relationship, Pudge, I've seen your chicken legs entirely too often, the Colonel deadpanned. So, Alaska, sell us some cigarettes. And then somehow the Colonel talked me into paying $5 for a pack of Marlboro Lights I had no intention of ever smoking. And he asked Alaska to join us, but she said, I have to find Takumi and tell him about the honk. She turned to me and asked, have you seen him? I had no idea whether I'd seen Takumi since I had no idea who he was. I just shook my head. All right, meet you at the lake in a few minutes then. The Colonel nodded. And that's the end of my reading. So Looking for Alaska was number 7 on this year's banned books list in the top 10. for offensive language, being sexually explicit and unsuited to the age group. And I mean, and this book has been on the banned books list for a while, but I think this is the only time it's been in the top 10. And then back in 2007 and 8, some community members in Depew, New York, tried to get it removed from an 11th grade reading list for being pornographic and disgusting. And John Green posted a YouTube video in response to that, and I'm going to try and put the link down in the bottom there. That was entitled, "I Am Not a Pornographer," and he talks about how offensive it is to him that some people find his book so offensive because he's just trying to write about like a universal teenage experience about making friends and finding sort of love, and he says, you know, there's some bad language in it, and there's one really awkward sex scene, but he said, you know, there's nothing sexy about it, and it's very clear in the text that, you know, there's no emotional connection, and nobody's actually enjoying themselves very much, and he said that I guess, you know, a lot of people think teenagers aren't capable of reading that nuance into books like this, to which he says, which I think is so great, shut up and stop condescending to teenagers, which is, to me, that's what banning and challenging books is all about, is just trying to keep our kids from learning and experiencing new viewpoints and perspectives, and it's very condescending, saying, no, this book isn't good for you, and trying to take it away, when who can really make that judgment call for anybody else, whether or not they're, you know, a child or a teenager, especially if it's somebody who isn't that, you know, minor's parent. It's just, it's so offensive, and these books are so important because, you know, they let kids see the world through different lenses and experience different cultures and ideas and things that they would never get in their own life. And it's important to expose young people to this as early as possible, and it helps make them good world citizens. And the people who try to ban books are just, it's like they just don't get it. They're missing the point of these books. So that's
I just want to say I agree with everyone else. You have an excellent reading, I guess, dramatization for reading. It was very well done. And thank you so much for sharing that book. I'd never heard of it. But, you know, as soon as you started reading, I was like, oh, you know, I could tell already what, you know, the objection is going to be for the book. A little bit too much realism, like you were sort of pointing out before. I think we, you know, since the concept of childhood and especially adolescence, the teen years, is really a relatively new concept. You know, worldwide, there's places in the world that they still don't really have those concepts going on. That maybe we're just sort of at an extreme now, where we really do think of children as very pure, and we don't want to corrupt them with stories that make them, you know, feel bad or that give them too much reality. Which is why I guess I was reading, this was a couple of years ago, how you know, some parents got together and decided to change the ending of Humpty Dumpty. So, you know, the Humpty Dumpty that many of us grew up with, where at the end, you know, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back together again, was now changed to, you know, if they click their heels 3 times and you know, and wish really, really hard, you know, that they could put him together again and he'll be just A-okay. So I think we're kind of at a crossroads in this newness of what children can understand, what they can take, and also what teenagers can understand and what they can take. I know I blab a lot, but just really quickly, it does really also remind me of, you know, it might kind of be at cross purposes with people like Stephen King, who, you know, under his name Richard Bachman, a long time ago, I think it was in the 70s or early 80s, he wrote a novella called Rage. And in the story, the main character does like a classroom takeover, and I think he ends up shooting the teacher and somebody else, and they have this really intense conversation in the class, and a lot of teenagers, you know, wrote about how they understood the guy's feelings, but, you know, no one said, I'm going to go out and do that, but then the next thing that happened was the chick who shot up the kids and said she hates Mondays and all that. So I think when it comes to children and teenagers, I think adults have a lot of fear. You know, we don't make monster movies about them the way we did in the 50s. We just straight out try to avoid giving them any taste of reality before we as adults feel that they're ready. So what do you guys think about that?
I think that kind of thing sort of does, you know, more harm than good. And you know, I do story time for preschoolers, and during my training, the instructor was telling us, you know, it's important to, when you're singing The Old Lady Who Swallowed the Fly, let her die at the end. Like, expose kids to morbidity like that, and you know, it's good for them to learn about those kind of things and experience that life's not all sunshine and unicorns and rainbows. And yeah, I mean, I think we were doing a disservice to kids, you know, and like Looking for Alaska is a great book that deals sort of with like sudden death, and you know, it could really help kids kind of process some of those things if they've had somebody die suddenly on them, and, you know, just dealing with all the emotions leading up to it and afterwards and everything. And, you know, you can't protect kids from everything, and I think it's important to expose them to things that are hard and real, because otherwise, how do they know how to handle themselves in the real world?
Yeah, I think that that's a major part of the ban and challenge of many of these books, which, you know, as we continue with the book readings and the discussions, we should keep in mind, what are the themes of these books, and why are they challenged, and why are they banned? And if you probably look under the reasons are really they have a commonness about them. Not a common theme necessarily, but I wonder if this fear and this overprotection, which I think people now label bubble wrapping the kids, plays into it. Are these books somehow too real for parents to handle? You know, I think of Loveline on K-Rock and how they have these frank discussions with teenagers about sex. Parents do not want to even think that their kids are engaging in any sort of, you know, activity like that. So, you know, it's a program that I'm sure gets challenged all the time, and that's a real world thing, much less books that'll give them ideas or books that are telling parents this is happening when parents don't want to believe it's happening. So as we continue through, you know, everyone just sort of, you know, think of these common themes, and as we go through the discussions, we can, you know, talk about them. Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone. So up next, we've pretty much mushed through since starting around 3:10. thank you very much, Amy. That was great. You did absolutely great. You read that very well. I felt like it was a teenager who was speaking to me. Like I said, we've been mushing through, just going through. Is anyone up for a break? I have one scheduled in a few moments. Actually, after 2 more books, we have a break scheduled. But if you'd like, we can all just take a quick 10-minute break right now. If you guys want to do a vote of hands or relieve your husband. Okay, so how about that? How about we take a 10-minute break or 9-minute break, and we'll just come back at 4:55. Okay, so everybody can go stretch your legs, grab some coffee, which is what I'm about to do right now. You know, whatever you need to do, and then we'll just all reconvene. Okay, so 4:55. We'll be back. Lori's here. Caroline, Elaine, Alyssa, Jay, Kristen, Lisa, Sarah. Kristen, would you happen to be ready to read your book or your selection? I like the exclamation point. Go ahead.
Hello, yes, I'm ready. My name is Kristen Lipska. I'm going to be reading from James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl. Outside in the garden, at that very moment, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker had just taken their places at the front gate, each with a bunch of tickets in her hand, and the first stream of early morning sightseers was visible in the distance, climbing up the hill to view the peach. "We shall make a fortune today," Aunt Spiker was saying. "Just look at all those people." "I wonder what became of that horrid little boy of ours last night," Aunt Sponge said. "He never did come back in, did he?" "He probably fell down in the dark and broke his leg," Aunt Spiker said. "Or his neck, maybe," Aunt Sponge said hopefully. "Just wait till I get my hands on him," Aunt Spiker said, waving her cane. "He'll never want to stay out all night again by the time I've finished with him. Good gracious me, what's that awful noise?" Both women swung around to look. The noise, of course, had been caused by the giant peach crashing through the fence that surrounded it, and now, gathering speed at every second, it came rolling across the garden toward the place where Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker were standing. They gaped. They screamed. They started to run. They panicked. They both got in each other's way. They began pushing and jostling, and each one of them was thinking only about saving herself. Aunt Sponge, the fat one, tripped over a box that she'd brought along to keep the money in and fell flat on her face. Aunt Spiker immediately tripped over Aunt Sponge and came down on top of her. They both lay on the ground, fighting and clawing and yelling and struggling frantically to get up again, but before they could do this, the mighty peach was upon them. There was a crunch, and then there was silence. The peach rolled on, and behind it, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker lay ironed out upon the grass, as flat and thin and lifeless as a couple of paper dolls cut out of a picture book. And now the peach had broken out of the garden and was over the edge of the hill, rolling and bouncing down the steep slope at a terrific pace. Faster and faster and faster it went, and the crowds of people who were climbing up the hill suddenly caught sight of this terrible monster plunging down upon them, and they screamed and scattered to the right and left as it was hurtling by. At the bottom of the hill, it charged across the road, knocking over a telegraph pole and flattening 2 parked automobiles as it went by. Then it rushed madly across about 20 fields, breaking down all the fences and hedges in its path. It went right through the middle of a herd of fine Jersey cows, and then through a flock of sheep, and then through a paddock full of horses, and then through a yard full of pigs, and soon the whole countryside was a seething mass of panic-stricken animals stampeding in all directions. The peach was still going at tremendous speed, with no sign of slowing down, and about a mile further on it came to a village. Down the main street of the village it rolled, with people leaping frantically out of its path right and left, and at the end of the street it went crashing through the wall of an enormous building and out the other side, leaving 2 gaping round holes in the brickwork. This building happened to be a famous factory where they made chocolate, and almost at once a great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes in the factory wall. A minute later, this brown, sticky mass was flowing through every street in the village, oozing under the doors of houses and into people's shops and gardens. Children were wading in it up to their knees, and some were even trying to swim in it, and all of them were sucking it into their mouths in great greedy gulps and shrieking with joy. But the peach rushed on across the countryside, on and on and on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Cowsheds, stables, pigsties, barns, bungalows, hayricks, anything that got in the way went toppling over like a 9-pin. An old man sitting quietly beside a stream had his fishing rod whisked out of his hands as it went dashing by, and a woman called Daisy Entwistle was standing so close to it as it passed that she had the skin taken off the tip of her long nose. Would it ever stop? Why should it? A round object will always keep on rolling as long as it is on a downhill slope. And in this case, the land sloped downhill all the way until it reached the ocean. The same ocean that James had begged his aunts to be allowed to visit the day before. Well, perhaps he was going to visit it now. The peach was rushing closer and closer to it every second, and closer also to the towering white cliffs that came first. These cliffs are the most famous in the whole of England, and they're hundreds of feet high. Below them, the sea is deep and cold and hungry. Many ships have been swallowed up and lost forever on this part of the coast, and all the men who are in them as well. The peach was now only 100 yards away from the cliff, now 50, now 20, now 10, now 5, and when it reached the edge of the cliff, it seemed to leap up into the sky and hang there suspended for a few seconds, still turning over and over in the air. Then it began to fall. Down, 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 smack. It hit the water with a colossal splash and sank like a stone. But a few seconds later, up it came again, and this time, up it stayed, floating serenely upon the surface of the water. All right. So, James and the Giant Peach was published in 1961, and it is number 56 on the ALA's list of 100 most frequently challenged books from 1990 to 2001. And it was challenged for being too scary for the targeted age group, mysticism, sexual inferences, profanity, racism, references to tobacco and alcohol, and claims that it promotes disobedience, drugs, and communism. Some of those are very confusing. Yeah, Lori's asking sexual. There's 2 sentences that were quoted, I think, as being challenged for being sexual. One is when something like when Miss Spider licks her lips, and then another one is when James tastes the juice of the peach at one point. And I see Carolyn saying mysticism. So I'll read this section from a blog. A challenge was brought before the school council in Indian River County, Florida, because the story's mystical elements involving the magic crocodile tongues which enchanted the peach tree. So, I mean, Roald Dahl is beloved, and I love everything I've read by him. I think this book is important because of how it deals with themes of abuse, and it's important for children to know abuse is a thing and that it's wrong, which is much better than not, like, going through the world not knowing this is a thing and, you know, whether it happens to you or not, thinking you're alone. similar to what Amy talked about with looking for Alaska. It's better to know than not know. And I think this book also promotes problem solving. So James is always the logical one and the cohort of all the bugs in the peach. He's always thinking of a solution to the problems they're in. And of course, what I love about the book is Dahl's macabre writing style. This dark sentiment was not reflected in a lot of children's books when I was a kid, but you can kind of see his influences now in Lemony Snicket and even in J.K. Rowling a little bit. So I especially love the dark tone of the book. And of course, it's a magical adventure, so what's not to love? That's it.
Okay. It just took me a few minutes to quit giggling because some of that was just so. But I guess that a lot of fruit does you know, kind of equate to sexuality because of, I guess, the story of Adam and Eve and the whole, you know, we think of it as an apple, but really it's a fruit. No one knows what it is. So it could be a pomegranate or it could be a peach, you know, and apple. So I guess, you know, people, when they look at this or read it, it automatically kind of slips into sexual innuendo for them. I'm just trying to figure out, as a parent, do you really think your kid, I mean, you know, is thinking about that? They're thinking, oh, big piece of fruit, and here you are thinking, your mind in the gutter, thinking, oh, the peaches are being licked. You know? So it's so strange. I mean, that was surprising to me a little bit. Like I say, a little. Let's see. Anyone have comments about any of this in terms of the sexuality aspect and why it's thought of as a sexual book, or you know, what are people thinking, or any other aspect? Please feel free. Stop giggling, Mira. Okay, well, has anyone read this book, either, you know, to their classroom or to their own child, or have any of you just looked at the book and read it, and what do you think about its suitability as parents or as teachers? Okay, so some of you want to reread it for the sex things. I bet it's a whole new book. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to give any comments or commentary about James and the Giant Peach before we move on? Last chance for romance, you guys.
I think this is one of the sentences that was challenged, or paragraphs. Let's see. The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him there was a curious bittersweet smell of fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees. The walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue. It tasted delicious. So that's about as sexual as it gets, which is not at all.
Well, who needs 50 Shades of Grey when you have James and the Giant Peach? Okay. So, again, I really do think that perhaps the complaints about the peach and the fruit and forbidden fruit and sexuality, it's all beginning to become wrapped up into one in the minds of adults, who kind of, a peach is no longer a peach. It means something to an adult, but to a child, it is a peach. So it does call into question what the censorship is really about. Okay, so I guess we're going to continue on now to the next person.
Jade, would you happen to be ready to present Bless Me Ultima? Yes, perfect.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. So I'm Jade Torres Morrison, and today I'm going to be reading from Bless Me Ultima by Rodolfo Anaya, and it was first published in 1972. It has been in the top 10 of ALA's most challenged books numerous years. Most recently it was number 3 in 2011. It was number 5 in 2010, and it just goes on and on. It's actually number 35, I believe, on ALA's most challenged books of 2000 to 2009. So it's been challenged quite a lot, and it's most often banned, and it's even been burned on occasion and challenged for various reasons, including profanity, violence, supposed occult or witchcraft themes, or for being anti-Catholic, which is debatable depending on how you interpret the book. But it's a really excellent book. It takes place in rural New Mexico in the 1940s. A young Hispanic boy learning about life. He develops a really special relationship with his grandmother, Ultima, who's a curandera, which is like a folk healer. And the book just is about his quest for knowledge and has themes of faith and questions about religion and self-identity and life and death, social issues, and just really about making sense of the world and coping in a world that's affected by good and evil. So he really grows in, it's kind of a loss of innocence and growing up in that harsh reality, but that's something everybody faces. So it's a really excellent book. I'm going to be reading from chapter 6, so I'll do that now. On the first day of school, I woke with a sick feeling in my stomach. It did not hurt, it just made me feel weak. The sun did not sing as it came over the hill. Today I would take the goat path and trek into town for years and years of schooling. For the first time I would be away from the protection of my mother. I was excited and sad about it. I heard my mother enter her kitchen, her realm in the castle the giants had built. Then I heard my father groan, "Ay Dios, otro día." Another day and more miles of that cursed highway to patch. And for whom? For me, that I might travel west? I know. That highway is not for the poor man. It is for the tourist. Ay Maria, we should have gone to California when we were young, when my sons were boys. He was sad. The breakfast dishes rattled. Today is Antonio's first day at school, she said. Another expense? In California, they say, the land flows with milk and honey. Any land will flow with milk and honey if it is worked with honest hands, my mother retorted. Look at what my brothers have done with the bottom land of El Puerto. Ay, mujer, always your brothers. On this hill only rocks grow. Ay, and whose fault is that we bought a worthless hill? No, you couldn't buy a fertile land along the river. You had to buy this piece of the llano. It is beautiful, he said with satisfaction. It is worthless. Look how hard we worked on the garden all summer. And for what? 2 baskets of chile and 1 of corn? There is freedom here. Try putting that in the lunch pails of your children. So Tony goes to school today, huh? He said. Yes, and you must talk to him. You must know the value of his education, she insisted. He must know what he can become. A priest, yes, for your brothers. His voice was cold. You leave my brothers out of this. They are honorable men. They have always treated you with respect. They were the first colonizer of the Llano Estacado. It was the Lunas who carried the charter from the Mexican government to settle the valley. That took courage. Led by the priest, my father interrupted. I listened intently. I did not yet know the full story of the first Luna priest. What? What did you say? Do not dare mention blasphemy when the children can hear. She scolded him and chased him out of the kitchen. Go feed the animals. My poor baby, she whispered, and then I heard her praying. I heard Ultima enter the kitchen. She said good morning to my mother and turned to help prepare breakfast. Her sound in the kitchen gave me the courage I needed to leap out of bed and into the freshly pressed clothes. The new shoes felt strange to the feet that had run bare for almost 7 years. I am a man of learning, my mother smiled when I entered the kitchen. She swept me in her arms, and before I knew it, she was crying on my shoulder. My baby will be gone today, she sobbed. He will be all right, Ultima said. The sons must leave the sides of their mothers. Yes, Grande, my mother nodded. It's just that he is so small and the last one to leave me. Go wash and comb, she said simply. I scrubbed my face until it was red. I wet my black hair and combed it. I looked at my dark face in the mirror. Jason had said there were secrets in the letters. What did he mean? Antonio, come and eat. He shall be a scholar, my mother smiled and served me first. I tried to eat, but the food stuck to the roof of my mouth. Remember, you are a Luna. And a Mares, my father interrupted her. He came in from feeding the animals. Jason had said, look at the letters carefully. Draw it on the tablet or in the sand of the playground. You will see it has magic. You are to bring honor to your family, my mother cautioned. Do nothing that will bring disrespect on your good name. I looked at Ultima, her magic, the magic of Jason's Indian. They could not save me now. What good does an education do them? My father filled his coffee cup. They only learn to speak like Indians. Gosh, okay, what kind of words are those? An education will make him a scholar, like the old Luna priest. A scholar already on his first day of school? Yes, my mother retorted. You know the signs at his birth were good. You remember, Grande, you offered him all the objects of life when he was just a baby. And what did he choose? The pen and the paper. True, Ultima agreed. Bueno, my father gave in to them. If that is what he is to be, then it is so. A man cannot struggle against his own fate. In my own day, we were given no schooling. Only the ricos could afford school. My father gave me a saddle blanket and a wild pony when I was 10. There is your life, he said, and he pointed to the llano. So the llano was my school. It was my teacher. It was my first love. It's time to go, Mama, Deborah interrupted. But those were beautiful years, my father continued. The llano was still virgin. There was grass as high as the stirrups of a grown horse. There was rain, and then the Tejano came and built his fences. The railroad came, the roads. It was like a bad wave of the ocean covering all that was good. Yes, it's time, Gabriel. Yes, my father answered, so it is. Be respectful to your teachers, he said. And you, Antonio, he smiled. Suerte. It made me feel good, like a man. Wait. We must have a blessing. Grande, please bless my children. She made us kneel with her in front of Ultima. And especially bless my Antonio, that all may go well for him, and that he may be a man of great learning. Even my father knelt for the blessing. Huddled in the kitchen, we bowed our heads. There was no sound. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santo. I felt Ultima's hand on my head, and at the same time I felt a great force, like a whirlwind, swirl about me. I looked up in a fright, thinking the wind would knock me off my knees. Ultima's bright eyes held me still. So that's all that I'll read. But this book is, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a beautifully written book, and it has tremendous literary value. It's on a lot of required reading lists for high schools, and it's one of the most respected works of Chicano literature. It's by Rudolfo Anaya, who is sort of regarded as the godfather of Chicano literature, and it's one of the works that was really instrumental in advancing awareness of Chicano literature and culture in many ways. It really sort of opened the genre and really just did so much for, at the time when it was written, you know, the Chicano rights movement was still in full swing, and it's a very powerful and meaningful book. It means a lot to me personally, as someone who was born and raised in New Mexico. It's one of the only books that I've seen that has really related to the cultural setting and the people and sort of the unique cultural aspect here in New Mexico. And it's one of the first books that represented this and in such a good way. But I think everybody can relate to Antonio's struggles, what he goes through, what he questions in life, the way he questions faith and he questions his destiny, and just as he grows and learns about the world. I think everyone can relate to this, and it just has a deep meaning that deals with things that everybody deals with. So I highly recommend it, and that is all.
Thank you so much for that. And I know this is you were saying that it's well known in Chicano as a Chicano literature piece. Also, is it not part of the literary genre of mystical realism? And does that sort of blend in with sort of other sort of religious symbols that include mysticism, like Santeria, is a mixture of Catholicism and paganism? And do you think that's why it's threatening to people, and why it's on the list of banned and challenged books?
Yes, it is part of the genre of mystical realism. And it's also sort of just become a modern American classic now, too. I think it was on the list of, I don't know, the Library of Congress, or someone recently put out a list of important books in the history of 20th century America. But I think the way religion is presented in this book is more, Antonio's questioning it. It's not necessarily anti at all, and it's Ultima is a curandera, which in our culture is not a witch. It's more like someone who uses nature, uses herbs and things to heal, and it's actually a very spiritual position, a very spiritual role. So I think that's been misinterpreted by people who don't understand it, and they then associate it automatically with witchcraft. But it does also have, because it has that good versus evil theme in it, there's the good spiritual aspect, but then there's these villainous characters that sort of have that bad or evil aspect to them, and that's sort of the main theme of the book. But I think people don't really get it when they read it, and they automatically associate it with witchcraft or something like that.
Okay, does anyone else have a question? And if you don't have a mic, you could go ahead and put the question in the chat, and one of us will read it for you. So let me give you guys a chance to go ahead and put questions. I do see that Mira says that it's banned in the Tucson Unified School District. So that's too bad. But any questions? I'll release the mic so you guys can hop on if you have a question. Okay, looks like you guys, let's see. Oh, somebody said something. Oh, I see. Okay. Wow. So they shut that down. That's unfortunate. And you did mention before that the book is a multiple award-winning book. So just something to think about before we go to the next, or while we listen to the next few readings. Why do you think so many award-winning books are challenged or banned? Where do you think that gap or that schism is happening in our society, where there's so many of us who, look to these awards to sort of guide us as educators, as parents, as, just members of the general public, in our choice of reading? We see something as a Caldecott winner, or, any of those. Why do you think those books are banned and challenged so much? Okay, Rosemary, go right ahead.
It's kind of like two sides of the same coin, isn't it? I mean, a book is given an award because it's groundbreaking and well-written. It makes people think. It makes people think outside the box. And these are the same things that scare people and make them want to control that. So I think it's just two sides of the coin.
And so basically you think then that, you know, a book being awarded, because even sociopolitically, we are right now in a really, you know, to kind of quote the Chinese proverb, we're living in interesting times. And so our country is going through the same thing on a socio-political level, where on the one hand, we're very angry that our schools, are not, hitting the mark, that our children are not doing better, that they're graduating at these abysmal rates and with these abysmal skills. But then on the other hand, we condemn intellectualism and elitism, and anything that's academic is considered, snooty and awful. So it's this sort of strange way that we look at being educated and questioning and challenging. Let me see, who is that? Oh, Rosemary again, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's me again. I have 2 of my 3 children in New York City public schools. My third one is a toddler right now, but I've seen over the past 10 years that I've been in the public school system that we as a society, we're less and less seeking to educate our kids and more just seeking to test them. The Common Core has its good points, but at least in New York, how it's being interpreted is solely for test prep. My kids are learning how to take tests. They're not learning how to extrapolate anything from a text that won't be on a test. When they're reading for pleasure, that's when I see them actually growing outside of what they're learning in the school. And I'm a very pro-teacher parent. I think that the teachers and the school librarians have a ridiculous amount of stress put on their shoulders by the DOE. But the issue is here, we're not teaching our kids anything other than how to take a test. And they seem to think, the government or whoever seems to feel that the way we're going to get better in academic standings in America is to test these kids until they fall apart.
Exactly. And so we're going to move on to the next reading. But as we do, again, keep this theme and these questions in mind. Because like she said, a few years back, Newsweek, it was on the front cover of Newsweek that our children, that the students in schools, K through 12, are lacking creativity. And without that spark, we don't have visionaries, like we don't have anyone to take over for Steve Jobs and George Lucas and, Steven Spielberg and, all of these creative visual thinkers that are going to retire soon, or they're going to, get older, and we need a pool to replace them. But if creativity is being taken out of schools, and if books like Bless Me Ultima that really push the creative spark in its readers and get them to think in these whole new ways are being banned and challenged, and children are not able to have access to them, what does that mean for our children and for their future and all of our future? So let's go ahead and move on to the next book and keep considering these questions that we've been asking. Monique?
So we're about, it looks like we have about, in time-wise, that's 30 minutes. Our event was going to be from 3 to 6 o'clock, but we still have 5 more readers who have books to share in regards to Banned Book Week. So I would like you guys to, I want us to at least, I know we're going to go overtime, but I don't want us to do overkill. So if everybody can, we're able to extend, that's absolutely correct. So you guys go ahead, and I just want you guys to know that, yes, I just want you guys to know that we still have another 5 readers for this event. So let's just keep that in mind. The next book that we have, we already took our break. and it's going to be for Alyssa, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. So, Alyssa, would you happen to be ready at this time? Is Alyssa here? Yes, ready? Perfect. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm having a little trouble with my microphone, so I wanted to first find out if everyone can hear me okay. Can everyone hear me? Yep, great. I have chosen to read just a little ring. Yeah, sorry, I hope you guys can still hear me. I have chosen to read from The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. According to Robert Doyle in the report, Books Challenged or Banned in 2012 to 2013, the book was, quote, challenged as a required reading in at least 3 freshman English classes at Westfield, New Jersey High School because of some very sensitive material in the book, including excerpts on masturbation, amongst other explicit sexual references, encouraging pornography, racism, religious irreverence, and strong language. It was also challenged at the West Valley School District in Yakima, Washington, because some parents found the sexual references and profanity in the novel inappropriate for high school students. Before I begin reading from the book, I want to share some excerpts from a blog post by Sherman Alexie, who responds to the challenging and banning of his book. Quote, "Why the best kids' books are written in blood," which was posted on the Wall Street Journal blog, Speak Easy. He writes, "Almost every day, my mailbox is filled with handwritten letters from students, teens, and preteens who have read my YA book and loved it. I have yet to receive a letter from a child somehow debilitated by the domestic violence, drug abuse, racism, poverty, sexuality, and murder contained in my book. To the contrary, kids as young as 10 have sent me autobiographical letters written in crayon, complete with drawings inspired by my book that are just as dark, terrifying, and redemptive as anything I've ever read." He continues to add, "I write books for teenagers because I vividly remember what it felt like to be a teen facing every day in epic dangers. I don't want to write to protect them. It's far too late for that. I write to give them weapons in the form of words and ideas that will help them fight their monsters. I write in blood because I remember what it felt like to bleed." Books have always been a powerful source of knowledge for me. I always knew that if I needed help with a problem, I could find answers in a book, most often at the library. I am shaped by the books I have read. I read from Sherman Alexie's book to give voice to words that others were banned from reading, to protest the intellectual freedom taken away from children in high schools across the nation, and to channel my outrage into Sherman Alexie's brilliant writing. I encourage others to do the same. I'm now going to read just from the beginning of the book for a short amount of time. The Black Eye of the Month Club. I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so that's not exactly true. I was actually born with too much cerebral spinal fluid inside my skull. But cerebral spinal fluid is just the doctor's fancy way of saying brain grease. And brain grease works inside the lobes like car grease works inside an engine. It keeps things running smooth and fast. But weird on me, I was born with too much grease inside my skull. And it got all thick and muddy and disgusting, and it only mucked up the works. My thinking and breathing and living engine slowed down and flooded. My brain was drowning in grease. But that makes the whole thing sound weirdo and funny, like my brain was a giant french fry. So it seems more serious and poetic and accurate to say, I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so maybe that's not a very serious way to say it either. Maybe the whole thing is weird and funny. But geez, did my mother and father and big sister and grandma and cousins and aunts and uncles think it was funny when the doctors cut open my little skull and sucked out all the extra water with some tiny vacuum? I was only 6 months old, and I was supposed to croak during the surgery. And even if I somehow survived the mini Hoover, I was supposed to suffer serious brain damage during the procedure and live the rest of my life as a vegetable. Well, I obviously survived the surgery. I wouldn't be writing this if I didn't. But I have all sorts of physical problems that are directly the result of my brain damage. First of all, I ended up having 42 teeth. The typical human has 32, right? But I have 42. 10 more than usual. 10 more than normal. 10 teeth past human. My teeth got so crowded that I could barely close my mouth. I went to Indian Health Service to get some teeth pulled so I could eat normally, not like some slobbering vulture. But the Indian Health Service funded major dental work only once a year, so I had to have all 10 extra teeth pulled in one day. And what's more, our white dentist believes that Indians only felt half as much pain as white people did, so he gave us half the Novocaine. What a bastard, huh? Indian Health Service also funded eyeglass purchases only once a year and offered one style, those ugly, thick, black plastic ones. My brain damage left me nearsighted in one eye and farsighted in the other, so my ugly glasses were all lopsided because my eyes were so lopsided. I get headaches because my eyes are like enemies, you know, like they used to be married to each other but now hate each other's guts. And I started wearing glasses when I was 3. So I ran around the res looking like a 3-year-old Indian grandpa. And oh, I was skinny. I turned sideways and disappeared. But my hands and feet were huge. My feet were a size 11 in 3rd grade. With my big feet and pencil body, I looked like a capital L walking down the road. And my skull was enormous. Epic. My head was so big that little Indian skulls orbited around it. Some of the kids called me Orbit, and other kids just called me Globe. The bullies would pick me up, spin me in circles, put their finger down on my skull and say, I want to go there. So obviously, I looked goofy on the outside, but it was the inside stuff that was the worst. First of all, I had seizures, at least 2 a week. So it was damaging my brain on a regular basis. But the thing is, I was having those seizures because I already had brain damage, so I was reopening wounds each time I sneezed. Because we're short of time, I'm going to leave it there and let other people have a chance to talk. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I guess in order to give everyone their chance to read, we'll just sort of have discussions maybe every other book and kind of put the last 2 that we have heard together. So that way we can just have a discussion in that way. So we're going to hold, go right ahead.
Sorry, this doesn't really have anything to do with the discussions. I'm actually going to need to scoot out pretty soon here, and I just wanted to know where we find the recording for this after it's all over.
Shay Monique?
As Lillian stated, all you have to do is just email the SJSU website or their email, and then we can go ahead and just send the link to you personally so that you can have access to it.
And Amy, since you also have to leave, why don't you go ahead and go after Caroline? So if that's okay with everybody, Caroline's going to go next. And then we'll have Amy, and then perhaps then we can have a short Q&A, and then finish up the readings. Does that sound all right to everyone?
Okay, I guess it's my turn, and I will start. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me like a smiley face or thumbs up or something like that. Yes? Okay, great. All right, well, my name is Caroline McNabb, and I'm going to just read a short excerpt from Our Bodies, Ourselves. This book was published first in 1971 by the Boston Women's Health Collective. In 2011, the 9th edition was published as a special 40th anniversary edition. This book has been challenged numerous times for its frank discussions about lesbianism, abortion, masturbation, and lots of other things. In the 1980s, Jerry Falwell called it obscene trash and claimed that it was anti-Christian and anti-family. It has been banned from many major bookstores, and many libraries in those early years banned it or kept it hidden behind the checkout counter. Our Bodies Ourselves is a very important book to me because of the honest information about women's health and sexuality. As a young adolescent, I, like most adolescents, had a lot of confusion about my changing body, and this book helped allay my fears by arming me with information, photographs, and personal anecdotes from real women. And in addition, this book told me that queerness was normal, which helped me come to terms with and feel pride in my identity. And this book was also really, really groundbreaking and influential because it influenced a new generation of women's health practitioners. So I'm going to be reading from the 2005 edition, page 178, Creating Supportive Communities. Most straight couples can hold hands in public, be safe going out together, feel welcomed by their families and at religious services, and celebrate their relationships openly. Though some straight couples who date across lines of race, ethnicity, class, and religion may not share all of these freedoms, they still are able to marry legally and access the rights to make decisions for each other in times of sickness and provide for each other's material well-being in case of death, among hundreds of other essential civil rights. Women in intimate relationships with women can take none of this for granted. I think that every woman who comes out to her family wants them to be accepting of her life and her relationships. It's very hard to have a close, loving relationship with a parent who has difficulty with their own homophobia. After 10 years, I would like to think that my mother could tell her friends that I am a lesbian in casual conversation, instead of staying silent when the issue of homosexuality comes up. Many of us have family members or other people in our social network who are either hostile, unsupportive, or ignorant about our relationships with our partners. Even if our straight family members and friends mean to be supportive, they may still be prone to making heterosexist assumptions about our relationships, such as that we're attracted to every woman we encounter, that we won't or shouldn't have children, or that our weddings are less significant or not as important to attend as a straight ceremony. Because of this, many of us find strength in developing a community of supportive friends that includes other queer people. Finding a network of queer people who share similar experiences, feelings, and questions can be particularly helpful when we are coming out or first exploring our sexual orientation. The queer community is incredibly diverse, and with diversity comes difference. Because of this, it can sometimes be difficult to find our place in the community where all the aspects of our identity can be acknowledged and appreciated. One Latina longs for a space where she's not approached by men or hit on by women who exoticize her ethnicity. In the majority of straight bars, we're vulnerable to men asking one of us out and the awkwardness of one of us having to watch the other get picked up. In, quote, lesbian bars, the looks are more about how we look. Gay women of color, it's so great that you're here. There's got to be a place somewhere for us. Another woman who is in a relationship with, quote, a woman who is now a man, says this about their partnership. He is still the woman I fell in love with, the strong, brilliant, tender person I fell in love with, but in a shiny new skin. He is now stronger, just as our love is stronger, because he is finally wholly himself. The same woman speaks of the couple's challenging search for community. We do not know where we fit now, except among the tiny group of trans men and their partners. We are an anonymous, straight couple to strangers, queer and straight alike, and a strange couple to our queer friends. Where do we fit? When do we come out? What are we? How do we explain? And will people accept us? A bisexual woman speaks to how people respond to her sexuality within the queer community. I feel bisexuals are invisible in the queer community. I'm particularly shocked that some folks continue to argue that we don't even exist. Thankfully, I don't experience as much outright hostility as when I first came out 15 years ago. At the same time, I never feel fully at home in lesbian space. I've been in a relationship with a woman for over 6 years, and part of me still feels less than among queers, like I'm crashing the party. My wife and I met at a social event for bi folks, and I thought, what a relief. At least I don't have to worry about whether she's biphobic. Finding people who can fully support us and rejoice in who we are is incredibly affirming and life-enhancing. At different periods in our lives, we may focus on building support around particular circumstances. Whether we're coming out, having children, moving to a new city, finding ourselves single, or going through any of life's transitions, we can find solace in and support from others who are at the same point in their lives. There are many ways to build a supportive and diverse community of people around us. Outside of our immediate network of family and friends, there are support groups, individual or group therapy, and LGBT centers. There are also thousands of local and national listservs or online email communities that allow people with similar interests to share resources and stories, and many of these are specifically for the queer community. If a religious or spiritual practice is part of our lives, we can find a place to join together with others who share our beliefs and who accept us for who we are. Some queer-friendly spiritual centers use the phrase open and inclusive to indicate that we are welcome. Queer newspapers or local email communities can help you locate these places more quickly. As LGBTQ women, we are often faced with discrimination because of whom we love. It's essential that we take care of one another. We can ask one another about our relationships and give our queer friends a loving place to discuss all of life's ups and downs. We can offer our time or money to organizations that support the rights and well-being of queer people, and we can do this by being out and proud. So that's my excerpt. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And your book touched upon yet another theme. It's kind of woven its way through the topics of all of the books, but this is more explicit in terms of sex. And it's starting to sort of blend in terms of sex and religion and how these seem to be two of the main reasons for challenging and banning books. So as we continue and we do our discussion and think about the other books in the reading, what do you think that says about our society and the freedoms that we give to allow others to have different point of views and thoughts on these topics, especially when they're through the availability of books that touch on these ideas? Just really quickly, what do you guys think? Caroline, would you like to kind of start off with that, since this was your choice in book?
I'm sorry, I actually have to run. So thank you so much for hosting this event and for moderating it. And I'm sorry that I have to run so fast, but I will listen to the end of it later through the link. Thank you.
No problem. Have a good evening, Caroline. Anyone else want to kind of touch upon that before we get straight to the next reading? Okay, so just keep that topic in mind, and again, with all the others, really think about that as we go through, all of our selections this evening. Okay, Shaymani?
And next we have the House of Spirit. Samira, are you ready? Is Samira present? Yeah, there she goes. She's typing. Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Shamanique, and thanks everybody else for the readings and the organizing. It's so wonderful to share this week with everybody and to hear what books are important to my classmates, because librarians are so cool when it comes to books. I am going to tell you a little bit briefly about why the House of the Spirits has been challenged a bunch. It's, as far as I could tell anyway, from Robert Doyle's book, The Banned Books Resource Guide, it has never been banned, or it hasn't been banned in the past 20 years or so. But it has seen objections on account of sexual encounters as well as violence, and it has been objected to twice on the grounds that it was, quote, immoral and sexually depraved. It has been challenged officially a number of times for being obscene, and that objection was raised both in terms of the book being on school reading lists, and also parents had objected to its presence on school library shelves, and they also noted that it was sexually explicit. And finally, people objected to the supposed defamation of the book against the Catholic faith and said that it contains, quote, pornographic passages. There's definitely no shortage of passages in the book involving sexual references, and because that's not hard to find, I'm going to skip that and read a slightly different passage. This is from the beginning of chapter 9, which is called Little Alba. Alba was born feet first, which is a sign of good luck. Her grandmother Clara searched her back and found the tiny star-shaped mark that distinguishes those born to true happiness. There is no need to worry about this little girl. She will be lucky and she will be happy. She will also have a good complexion because that is inherited, and at my age I have no wrinkles and I've never had a pimple, Clara declared 2 days after the birth. This is why they made no effort to prepare the child for life, since the stars had already conspired to endow her with so many gifts. Her sign was Leo. Her grandmother studied her astrological chart and recorded her destiny in white ink on an album with pages of black paper, in which she also pasted the child's first greenish locks of hair, the fingernails she clipped soon after her birth, and various portraits that allow one to see her as she was then, an extraordinarily tiny creature, almost bald, creased and pale, with no other sign of human intelligence than her sparkling black eyes, which bore an expression of ancient wisdom even when she was in the cradle. They were identical to those of her father. Her mother wanted to call her her mother wanted to call her Clara, but her grandmother did not believe in repeating names because it created confusion in her notebooks that bore witness to life. They searched for a name in a thesaurus, where they found hers, the last in a chain of luminous words. Now, keep in mind that this book, as you may imagine based on the level of the language, is usually on book lists for kids who are in the later high school years and in more advanced or advanced placement English classes. And it's difficult for me to imagine that there's very much in here, including the sexual references and the things that are no doubt referred to as obscene. It's difficult to imagine that there's very much that's in there that they have not been exposed to or couldn't handle in an advanced placement setting with an instructor. It doesn't go into pornography, excuse me, in my opinion, although there is some explicit reference to sexuality and to birth. For me, I depend on writers like Isabel Allende because their use of language is beautiful. And I'm enamored of the kind of creativity and freedom that Isabel Allende in particular puts on the page. She exhibits the kind of personal freedom that I don't tend to express very easily, and so it's such an escape for me to be able to read it from somebody like her, and I just admire the hell out of it. And just in terms of what I would do if I were prevented from reading it, or how would I feel if I were prevented from reading it, it's funny for me to think about a book like this in those terms because it was published first in the United States in English in 1985, and it's been a bestseller almost since then. It's been made into a movie with, I think Meryl Streep was in it, if I'm not mistaken. But at the same time, this was Isabel Allende's first novel, and so when I think about it having been banned, or me not having access to the book, I imagine what would have happened if Isabel Allende had decided to stop writing after that. And that's what happens with some authors when their books are banned. Censorship has a chilling effect, and authors just never take off as a result of their books being shut down. And that's really what people being prevented this book means to me, that if people had been prevented from reading Isabel Allende's novel, The House of the Spirits, it's entirely possible that they would never have gotten to read Zorro and Paula and all the others that have come since then. And with that, I think I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your reading. And so this is a great time for just a quick question or two, if anyone has it. Like, for example, you were mentioning about, this having a chilling effect on authors, on writers. And so, one thing I would like to ask you is, if literature as an art can be difficult in the same way music and fine art can be for many people. So, do you see a point for those who wish to ban certain books? I mean, not this book particularly. You can talk about your book since this is your choice, but all of you as well, think about books that you've read, and do you sort of, when you hear about the book wanting to be challenged or banned, do you think to yourself, well, I see that they have a point. This book can be a little much for the average person. Do any of you ever think of that? Just really quickly, anyone? But Mira, that was toward you mostly.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, but I'll just share one really quickly since I am looking at the time. I think that there is an issue with some children not being prepared to deal with certain books, and I think that as the great Jamie LaRue, who Lisa and I have been reading in Beth Van Estes' 267 seminar on intellectual freedom, as the great Jamie LaRue says, and ALA says it too, parents are entitled to keep their kids from reading certain books, and while people are under the age of 18 in the United States, it's entirely legal for parents to make that judgment about their own children, and individuals can make that judgment about themselves in the library for that matter, but we have the right to decide what we read and what our own children read, and not what anybody else's children read or what anybody else does. So yes, I think that there is a real issue with some people not being able to handle certain literature, and that shouldn't necessarily say anything about whether others can read it too.
Thank you for that answer. And so we are coming up on the 6 o'clock hour, but we do have just 2 more readings. So we hope that you're able to just stick around just for a few more minutes, because we're going to allow our last 2 readers to get their selections in, because this has just been great. So without further ado, Shamonique.
Jennifer, are you ready to read your excerpt? Perfect. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. If you could just give me a smiley face or something to let me know that you can hear me okay. Wonderful. Okay. So I will try to make this quick. My name is Jennifer Ulrich. I'm in my 2nd semester here in the SJSU program. I chose to read an excerpt from Fahrenheit 451 because it is one of my favorite books, but also I have a 12-year-old little brother who I actually just recently encouraged to read this book. I know it's on high school reading lists, but he's a little mature for his age, and I thought he could handle it. And he was so blown away by the book, and it really led to an amazing conversation with him about books and ideas and being controlled and censorship and expurgation and everything. And it was so wonderful. And the irony, well, of reading it in a banned books week, it was too delicious. I couldn't resist. So I'm sure many are familiar with this. It's the number 69 on the ALA's Top 100 Banned or Challenge Books from 2000-2009. It's a dystopian novel written by Ray Bradbury, published in 1953. I know it's regarded as one of his best work. It's one of my favorites. And just for the sake of time, if I may, I'm going to jump right in. I'm reading from the 1996 quality trade paperback version, and I will be starting on page 57, where the fireman Guy Montag is having a discussion with the Captain Beatty. Now, let's take up the minorities in our civilization, shall we? Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, doctors, lawyers, merchants, chiefs, Mormons, Baptists, Unitarians, second-generation Chinese, Swedes, Italians, Germans, Texans, Brooklynites, Irishmen, people from Oregon or Mexico. The people in this book, this play, this TV serial are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, mechanics anywhere. The bigger your market, Montag, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. All the minor minorities with their navels to be kept clean. Authors full of evil thoughts. Lock up your typewriters. They did. Magazines became a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books, so the damned snobbish critics said, were dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling, the critics said. But the public, knowing what it wanted, spinning happily, let the comic books survive. And the 3-dimensional sex magazines, of course. There you have it, Montag. It didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. Today, thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. You are allowed to read comics, the good old confessions, or trade journals. Yes, but what about the firemen then? Asked Montag. Ah, Beatty leaned forward in the faint mist of smoke from his pipe. What more easily explained and natural? With school turning out more runners, jumpers, racers, tinkerers, grabbers, snatchers, flyers, and swimmers instead of examiners, critics, knowers, and imaginative creators, the word intellectual, of course, became the swear word it deserved to be. You always dread the unfamiliar. Surely you remember the boy in your own class, your own school class, who was exceptionally bright, did most of the reciting and answering, while the others sat like so many leaden idols, hating him. And wasn't it this bright boy you selected for beatings and tortures after hours? Of course it was. We must all be alike. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of every other, then all are happy, for there are no mountains to make them cower, to judge themselves against. So, a book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man? Me, I won't stomach them for a minute. And so when houses were finally fireproofed completely all over the world, you were correct in your assumption the other night, there was no longer need of firemen for the old purposes. They were given the new job as custodians of our peace of mind, the focus of our understandable and rightful dread of being inferior. Official censors, judges, and executors. That's you, Montag, and that's me. The door to the parlor opened and Mildred stood there, looking in at them, looking at Beatty and then at Montag. Behind her, the walls of the room were flooded with green and yellow and orange fireworks, sizzling and bursting to some music composed almost completely of trap drums, tom-toms, and cymbals. Her mouth moved and she was saying something, but the sound covered it. Beatty knocked his pipe into the palm of his pink hand, studied the ashes as if they were a symbol to be diagnosed, and searched for meaning. You must understand that our civilization is so vast that we can't have our minorities upset and stirred. Ask yourself, what do we want in this country, above all? People want to be happy, isn't that right? Haven't you heard it all your life? I want to be happy, people say. Well, aren't they? Don't we keep them moving? Don't we give them fun? That's all we live for, isn't it? For pleasure, for titillation? And you must admit, our culture provides plenty of these. Yes. Montag could lip read what Mildred was saying in the doorway. He tried not to look at her mouth because then Beatty might turn and read what was there too. Colored people don't like Little Black Sambo? Burn it. White people don't feel good about Uncle Tom's Cabin? Burn it. Someone's written a book on tobacco and cancer of the lungs? The cigarette people are weeping? Burn the book. Serenity, Montag. Peace, Montag. Take your fight outside. Better yet, into the incinerator. Funerals are unhappy and pagan? Eliminate them too. 5 minutes after a person is dead, he's on his way to the big flu. The incinerator is serviced by helicopters all over the country. 10 minutes after death, a man's a speck of black dust. Let's not quibble over individuals with memoriams. Forget them. Burn all. Burn everything. Fire is bright, and fire is clean. And I guess, God knows I could keep going, but I guess we'll stop there. Yay, I'm glad you guys liked it. I was torn by so many different excerpts, so I'll let go of the mic for now. Thank you.
Jennifer, that was an amazing, amazing excerpt that perfectly just contained the essence of Fahrenheit 451. Very, very, very great job. Very great job. Does anybody have any thoughts on this particular excerpt? Jennifer, was there anything else that you wanted to share in regards to Fahrenheit 451? I'll go to Mike.
Oh, criminy. I mean, I could, we could spend hours talking about this book. I just, if anyone hasn't read it, and it would blow my mind to think that anyone in this room really could not have read this, but you know what, read it again. Just, it's so worth it. If you want to talk about, bring up any questions, I'll give my best to answer them, but I was just so excited to bring this forward, and I was surprised no one else had put it on a Google spreadsheet, so.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah, that book itself, I may have read it. I think I read it the first time when I was in 4th grade, and even in the 4th grade, it was able to depict something that my 8-year-old brain could comprehend. And then reading it again later in high school and then again in college, like, there's something to be taken every single time you read it. It's something that appeals to you, something that it's just the true essence, I feel, of Banned Book Week. Just taking information away from people because we don't want them to think freely, because we don't want them to be, to be independent in regards to their thought. We don't want them to challenge the status quo and the norm. And oftentimes that's what the books that are banned, they do. That's what they do. They challenge the peace, and they bring up things that are often unsettling and things that people would dare question because it's too sensitive of a subject. But like I said, that was a great excerpt, and that was exactly great job. No, you did great, Jennifer. So does anyone else have any points they'd like to articulate? Michelle, I see you texting or typing rather. So did you have anything you wanted to say, or did you all want to move on to our last book? Michelle, is she here? Are you present? Yes, yes, yes. So our last excerpt tonight is going to be from Michelle. It's a surprise. We weren't particularly certain which book she'd be reading, so I don't have an image for her book. But Michelle, you have a mic.
Thank you so much. I surely appreciate it. And I'm sorry that I was so indecisive that I couldn't decide what I was going to be reading. So I just copied and pasted the image up on the screen. So I chose to read from Chris Crutcher's Athletic Shorts, which is a collection of short stories written for young adults. When I was thinking about Banned Books Week and, thinking about books that have been challenged, and then, looking at my bookshelf, honestly, about every other one had been, so I had a lot to choose from, as I'm sure all of you did as well. And I, really deliberated, but when I became passionate about intellectual freedom was actually before I entered the LIS field, but instead was in my previous life as a high school English teacher. And I had students who lived really complicated, difficult lives, and reading and teaching English for me was a way to connect with students in the wide range of experiences that they had. And so the book that I'm going to read from is not a book that I have taught in my life when I was a high school teacher, anything like that. But I think of it as a book that appeals to young people because Chris Crutcher has a couple things going for him. One, he's a great storyteller. Secondly, he's really funny in his writing, and he writes with incredible compassion, and he can really get young people, I think, to a point where they really question their own position and how they would respond in a situation. His books have been widely challenged for themes of homosexuality, themes of lack of respect for parents, I read somewhere, questioning of religion or of God. So the one that I'm going to be reading an excerpt from is the last story in this collection, entitled In the Time I Get. And it's about a young man who is in high school. His name is Louis, and he is a football player, kind of a jock. His best friend is Carter, who he plays football with, and who is quite homophobic. And Louis is also friends with Darren, who is a closeted gay friend who is dying of AIDS. And so you can see just in that situation that there's going to be a conflict there of allegiances and betrayal and so forth. So I'm going to read sort of a short excerpt from this, and I need to let you know that I am pulling out paragraphs so that things kind of hold together. So if you are thinking, it seems like there was not a clear transition there from that paragraph to the next paragraph, you're right. It was not Chris Crutcher's fault. It's my fault in not abridging it appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and read. This is from the when the character Darren is close to death. AIDS didn't tarry. On the afternoon of July 19th, 2 days after my birthday, I came home from my second job pumping gas at Norm's service station to find a message on my mom's answering machine. Hey, Louie, I haven't seen you for a while. Look, I'm up in the county hospital for a while. Why don't you come up and see me if you get a chance? There was no mistaking Darren's voice. I mean, in one sense, Carter was right. He did sound like what you would think of as gay. Stereotype or not, that's what he sounded like. God, I didn't want to go. My commitment to Carter aside, the remembrance of death was so fresh that I could almost smell it. Plus, I had seen enough news stories on TV and pictures in the paper to know some of the bad things AIDS usually does before it lets you go. And I was really afraid to see that up close. I should have parked around back, out of sight of the main road, but I pulled up directly in front of the main entrance. The rooms are small, and Darren was back by himself all the way at the end of the hall behind the front desk. There were probably 3 or 4 other patients in the whole place. I remember wondering if they put him back there in case anyone in town figured out why he was there, so nobody would have to go by his room. And then there's a reference to an earlier conversation that Darren and Louis had, and so this part is in italics, meaning that it's a reference to an earlier part. The worst part is nobody touches you. Hey man, I said at the doorway, how you doing? Been better, he said. I stood there nodding my head. He said, come on in. I'm no more contagious now than I ever was. What happened? Sometimes it just comes after you, he said. Any little old germ just has its way. You have nothing to fight back with. I knew Darren couldn't have lost much weight in such a short time, but he looked like he had dropped about 15 pounds, most of it around his eyes. I walked on into the room and sat in a metal chair beside his bed. I guess I don't look so hot, huh? I shook my head. Not so hot. He said, tell me about Becky. And Becky is Louie's girlfriend who had died a year earlier. What do you want to know? I want to know what it's like to be left behind. What happens to the people who don't die? I'm worried about the people I love. And then they have a conversation about Becky's death. He was quiet a minute. Then he looked over at me and took a deep breath. He said, Louie, would you hold my hand? To this day, I hate myself for what I almost said. I almost said no. And it wasn't because I was afraid I'd get AIDS. It was the other reason. But I love myself for what I did say. I said yes. I said yes. I reached over and I put his hand between both of mine. It was real awkward, and I know he probably felt that. But I did it. And I'm glad now, because now I don't have to look back and wish. And I'm going to skip a bit here. Then I looked up and saw Carter standing in the doorway. He said, I saw your car. Instinctively, I jerked my hands free from Darren's, but it was too late. Carter grimaced and shook his head, then walked away. Darren opened his eyes in time to see Carter's back, and I think he sank a little. If there was one thing I could change about all that happened, it would be that moment. So I just wanted to read that portion because I think that it keys in on the conflict that young people have when they're in a situation where kindness is one option, but they may have difficulty in being kind or compassionate to a friend because of pressure from another friend. And I think we've all been in those situations where it's hard to stick up for someone who, where we know that we're risking our own social standing in doing so. And I think Chris Crutcher does a really good job of putting characters in these situations and helping us see how we might respond in a situation and what is the kind response in these situations. So when I had students who, were dealing with a lot of the situations, maybe not AIDS necessarily, but complicated family situations and homosexuality and all of these situations, I was always happy to see them pick up one of Chris Crutcher's books because I know that he, spoke to them in a way that I think that is really valuable for young adult authors. So I know that it's late, and so I think I'm going to wrap up with that. But thank you all so much, and thanks for having this wonderful event. I think that it's really important, and I'm glad that you all had it.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was very well read. We got a full synopsis of what the author had in mind. Did anybody have any thoughts in regards to the excerpt we just heard?
Just basically to wrap up and also give some thought to the entire idea of the banned and challenged book. One thing that also seems to come up quite a bit is when you challenge a book or when you ban a book, you're giving it a lot of airplay, you're giving it a lot of advertisement, and so one of the things that happens is that people run right out to see what the fuss is. And so that book ends up being more widely read and more known about than if, you know, it wasn't banned or pointed out as being bad. And just really quickly, the idea of darkness in books, especially for children's books and YA books, I think those elements are important, even though we were talking earlier about bubble wrapping and trying to keep our kids away from the truth, like friends who might have AIDS or friends who have these difficult home lives and, you know, they're going through depression, you know, mental illness and things of that nature. When you send your kids to school, they're open to these experiences. And I think, you know, as Michelle was saying, authors like Crutcher really do speak to kids and help them in a way that the adults in the kids' lives in the real world are not able to cope with for whatever reason. So anyone like to go ahead and comment before we wrap up and say goodnight? I feel like that teacher in Ferris Bueller. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. Last chance. Let's give it another second. Anyone would like to comment? And then we'll go ahead and say goodnight if no one has any more questions or commentary. Okay, Shane Monique.
I just simply want to say thank you to everyone who came and read and those who participated, those who just listened. This was a very, very well done event. I think you guys all did amazing, and I learned a lot with the books that you all shared. So on behalf of ALASC, I want to say thank you, and you guys have a great weekend.